panic! Ah!
Oh no!
We're live, everyone! We are live! And it is time to talk about Artemis Fowl. First of all, how are you all doing, everyone? I hope it's the most wonderful Friday evening for you. It's not going to get any better, unfortunately. And I have brought along some friends for the suffering. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
It's me, Allison Pregler.
And
I'm here.
And me, Michael Skitchiano, or Skitch.
Yes, and together we have all watched Artemis Fowl, which arrived on Disney Plus as of today. And boy oh boy, do we have a lot of thoughts on it. But first, I have to try and cohere this into some kind of plot synopsis that actually makes sense. So, the plot of Artemis Fowl is that, of course, it is about a 12-year-old supposed criminal mastermind played by Ferdia Shaw, whose father, Artemis Fowl Sr., played by Colin Farrell, has been kidnapped by a nefarious pixie called Opal, supposedly played by Hong Chow. We're not quite sure of that, but supposedly, and is asked to find a mysterious MacGuffin called the powerful Aculos. Meanwhile, Holly Short, played by Lara McDonnell, is a rookie pixie officer for the lower elven officer, even for the lower elements police, or leprechaun, and she has been sent out to find said Aculos as well, and Artemis and Holly collide, and then most of the movie is set at Artemis's house, I guess. So, before we really dive deep, how familiar are you with the Artemis Fowl books? Because I am not, and I deliberately avoided learning much about Artemis Fowl because I want to be the layperson here. I want to be the one going, okay, I'm going to treat this as a movie, not as an adaptation.
Artemis Fowl is a book I read around when it came out, so about 20 years ago. So I did not recall much of the plot. I do recall some things they changed, which I do have a problem with. But one of the main issues I had with Artemis Fowl as a book, which is evident in this movie as well, is that Artemis Fowl is a character that's very hard to like or get behind or want to follow. Child genius villain. He's the antagonist of the series, although this movie very much made him not even that compelling. But he's like the villain.
The movie has problems.
So you only have two things to focus on. You have the villain kid character, or you have fairy cops, which is not as compelling as they think that is either. So yeah, that's my familiarity with it.
Yeah, good timing on the fairy cops angle. If there was a movie that we needed to see about fairy cops, this was definitely not the time for it.
Absolutely not. And I'm like you, Matt. I have no familiarity with the books or the fact that this was an adaptation of a book coming into it. I just knew that it was not going to be good, and oh boy, it delivered in that respect.
We have a super chat from Carson Kelly. Hope this makes up for the trauma you guys endured. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kelly.
$10 to Film Brain for the trauma.
Yeah. A little goes a long way. Oh, man. So
I think foul is a good description, isn't it, for this movie?
Absolutely.
F-A-F-O-U-L.
Foul by nature. Yeah. How many jokes do you think, how many critics do you think came up with that particular joke?
Oh, yeah, or
I'm gonna guess
foul play, or they committed a foul, or...
Yeah. So
foul ball.
Fowl has had a particularly tortured time getting to the big screen. It's been in development for 20 years, and apparently... has been through numerous hands, including Harvey Weinstein's, unfortunately.
They sold the rights to this to Disney before the first book was published. Mm-hmm. There was an advertisement in the first book about the movie. I remember seeing that. Get ready for the Artemis Fowl movie. And now I was prepared for this day.
Mm-hmm.
You waited a long time.
It's on
So
the
this
edge of my seat.
movie, yeah, was meant to come out last summer. It was meant to come out in August of 2019. They released a trailer for it, I think about May 2019. It was a very short teaser trailer. I went, that's very vague for a movie that's supposedly coming out quite soon. And then sure enough, they bumped it a whole year. And then it was meant to be out in theatres at the end of May this year. And then obviously that didn't happen because, whole COVID-19 stuff. So it's ended up on Disney+. So I guess Disney are cutting their losses on the $125 million they spent on this.
I cannot believe they spent $125 million on what is essentially just a movie set in a house for most of it.
Yeah. That has to be from the reshoots.
Yeah.
That has to be from essentially shooting the film twice.
Yeah, even if you hadn't said this was reshot extensively, you can tell because
Absolutely.
there's so much voiceover exposition. It's about like 60-70% of it is exposition. It goes on forever. And the whole wraparound with Josh Gad as the classic Mulch Diggums where he's in custody and he's retelling the story to the police about this, even though he is in one scene until like the final act of it, basically, and then he's in the movie. He's explaining all of these things that he wouldn't be there for, and you can tell it's just a reshot.
Oh yeah, it's horrendous. The way the movie starts, it opens with Mulch Diggums being brought to some sort of MI6 secret oil rig interrogation place, and he's being interrogated by the voice of Kenneth Branagh, and even at the very end of the movie, I'm still not entirely sure how he end up in there and why particularly.
Because Artemis arranged it. He told us. He's such a genius. He arranged for it to happen.
He's such a genius. He put a tracking device in him.
He arranged for it to happen so he could tell his story and go like, "Hey, leave the fowls alone, because I'm so cool." He was his own hype man. How do we know anything in the movie really happened? This is just what he told Mulch Diggums happened, and then he told the people. Yeah. It's a very unreliable narrator, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's essentially an excuse for Josh Gad to literally talk into the camera exactly what I'm doing at length. Every so often they will keep cutting to Josh Gad, and every time they have to introduce a character, Josh Gad will talk about that person like he in any way knew them, despite the fact that he's hardly in the movie for the majority of the running time.
Yeah, it's just sort of like. I mentioned this when we were watching. It gave me the vibes that the movie was both way too short but excessively padded at the same time.
It barely got 88 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got to about 88 minutes worth of running time, and that was about it. You can tell that they were hitting a 90-minute mark. Like, we gotta get this to absolutely 90 minutes. Doesn't matter what happens in it. Doesn't, like, character beats or anything. Nothing. Because this movie is absolutely all over the place. We haven't even mentioned the fact that there is dueling narrators, because also Colin Farrell's character also serves as something of a narrator, because Artemis keeps reading the journals left behind by his dad. So there's more exposition on top of the exposition, as well as the exposition being delivered constantly out of the dialogue simultaneously.
Well, you could pick out where the reshoot exposition was, where the other reshoot exposition was, where the original exposition was, because they go from the M16 interrogation center Josh Gad narration into like, and then here's his dad, and then here's Artemis Fowl, and then it was here's after that wraparound segment they went to Artemis Fowl, our first introduction to him. He's talking to like this psychologist, I think at the school, about like a chair or something, and then the psychologist is also telling us his backstory. He's like, "You're a genius, you know all this stuff, This is them telling us who Artemis Fowl is and what his MO is and all that, and like we already know this from the other narration. We're not actually seeing any of this from Artemis Fowl himself, who is probably the weakest element of this film."
No, exactly. Just a quick super chat from Parabimo8. Do you watch any anime films or shows? I'm afraid I don't. Not a lot, I'm afraid. Not a lot. Going back to the...
There was a manga, I think, of Artemis Fowl. Does that tie in? Maybe just a graphic novel.
Yeah, there is some interesting stuff. It could be an anime. The scene with the psychiatrist is emblematic of the entire movie, where nothing is ever actually shown. Mm-hmm. It's always told.
Yep.
It always feels like reams and reams of exposition. It feels like you're reading character biographies off Wikipedia.
Yeah. They keep hyping up. They keep hyping up what a genius Artemis Fowl is, but we never see it. He doesn't really come up. He even says at the end, he says like, "I'm a genius" or something.
I'm a criminal mastermind.
Mastermind, and we're like, what?
Yes. He says he's a criminal mastermind, having done almost nothing criminal throughout the entire the running.
No, if anything, he came off like less of a villain, which I mean would help to make him more likable than in the books. But then he came off like nothing. They didn't give us anything.
Yeah. Artemis himself is a crucial, fundamental problem with this movie, because in terms of the characterization, okay, the character in the book is an anti-hero. He's not meant to be the hero that we're rooting for. He gets something resembling a redemption arc, as I understand it, but essentially he's the villain of the story. He's meant to be the sort of character that we're meant to dislike but also be charmed by at the same time. And you can clearly tell the filmmakers were like, but we need to make him likable, we need to make him accessible to children. And it feels like they've completely missed the point of the story, because by taking out the main, sort of characterization of the character, you're left with a real void, especially in terms of the performance. The kid that stars in it, Ferda Shaw, this is his first movie. I felt so bad for him throughout the entirety of this film.
You mean, according to IMDb, Deferds himself?
Deferds.
I felt really bad for Deferds. I don't think he was ready. No. I think he's just too green, and his performance, you could tell like everyone was acting circles around him, and like I don't want to be too down on him about it, because I think he put in a really good effort, but I think like he just needed to start with some smaller parts and get a little more experience, because he just comes off very weak in this.
Oh yeah, he is very, very weak in this, and especially considering he's ostensibly meant to be the main character. Yeah. He like you said, he's just not ready for prime time, and I blame a lot of this on Kenneth Branagh, not the kid, because Kenneth Branagh should be the one that's directing him, and every time he comes out with what is supposed to be meant to be a big, impressive line reading, just completely flat.
Yeah.
That last line where he says like that he's a criminal mastermind, that is meant to be the big badass finishing line. If they didn't have that reshoot segment with Josh Gad, that would have been the final line of the movie before he flies off in his helicopter into the sunset. That's absolutely what that was. But it was so flat.
Yeah.
It was arguably the worst line read of the movie is "I'm a criminal mastermind."
Oh man. And the thing about the kid is apparently the great grandson of apparently the grandson of Robert Shaw, the actor who played Quentin Jaws and Grant in From Russia with Love, which is some
Mm-hmm.
familial connections there. Yep. It almost feels like they picked him because of that to a certain extent, but it like you said before, he's just not ready for this kind of part, and I feel like Artemis as a character, when you've got a role that's not being played very well and not being very well written, you've got an immediate void at the centre of the movie, and I feel like the filmmakers were trying to compensate with that, because another thing that they added in the reshoots apparently was Colin Farrell playing his father. The whole kidnapping angle is so clearly bolted on, it feels like Colin Farrell is in another dimension half the time.
He shot his scenes in 3 days. And considering how much of this plot seems to be what's happening in the movie is this kidnapping angle, and that was a reshoot and also something from like the second book. Like that's pretty bad. Like, what was the original movie like before they added this stuff?
One of the comments
quick super chat from Lindsay, who does the titles for Projector. Hug Minion says hello. This movie hurt me. It hurts us too.
Mm-hmm. I saw a comment that someone said that the first trailer for this movie had scenes that were clearly not in the final product as well, which sort of further points to like reshoots and other things that were done in this particular production.
Oh yeah, you can clearly tell that this had been hacked up and bolted back together, maybe even several times. Mm-hmm. It feels like they had a test screening, and the notes they got were, we can't understand the plot, we don't know who any of the characters are, and we want more Josh Gad. And they addressed those 3 issues with clumsy voiceover, terrible wraparound device, and just more exposition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if there was... It's hard to tell what is part... I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's obviously reshoots, but it's hard to tell what other things might be reshoots. So I don't know if this stuff was part of it, but when they have like the clunky stuff, like when the fairy police are talking to each other and it's like, her father was a traitor, and as you know, and do.
Yeah.
It's like, what you need to, like, that's so clunky, just this one line just to let us know what's going on when it was such an important part of the character. I remember that being very important in the book. And there's a lot of things about her character in particular, Holly's character, that like was completely removed from the movie. She has no arc at all.
Mm-hmm. No. Just a quick super chat again from Cartoon Kelly. Have some more money to improve the foul mood this movie left you in. Thank you, Kelly. Indeed. Holly is meant to be the main character of the books, as I understand it, and she most obviously gets the short shrift in this adaptation because, this movie doesn't seem to know who is meant to be the protagonist. Sometimes it's Holly, sometimes it's Artemis, and then sometimes Josh Gad shows up claiming that he's the protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Mulch Diggums, that classic Mulch Diggums. Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk about, because we're talking about Holly, the whitewashing in this movie, which is not great. Because as her character is described in the book, and all the fairies really, they're described as having coffee-colored skin tones, so they are clearly not white, but they've made them very white in this movie. And then there's other characters that they've changed, like, okay, so the butler is like in the book Eurasian, but they changed him into a black guy, and it's like just shifting one, like making a character not black and then the other one like who is a character in servitude black does not really like that's not a good look for this movie.
Nope.
All of the people of color are like supporting characters.
Two more super chats. One from B. Love your content. I've been a subscriber for years. Love the beard, by the way. Oh, thank you. It's not intentional. I watched Equilibrium last night and was yelling symbolism. And Lord SMAF asks, since the book is Irish, how good or bad are the accents? Well, the kid playing Artemis is actually Irish, so points for him. Josh Gad, terrible. Sounds like Batman.
Yep.
And Judi Dench does a surprisingly good try, but does sound a bit like Mrs. Brown's Boy.
She actually says "top of the morning" and then what was the 4-leaf clover line again?
Get the 4-leaf clover out of here.
Get the 4-leaf clover out of here. What in the world?
That's the level of dialogue.
That is amazing dialogue right there. That's one of it. That was so...
Someone told Judi Dench that she had to say the line, "Get the 4-leaf clover out of here," in all seriousness. Like, man, that is some friendship between Judi Dench and Kenneth Branagh that you're allowed to say things like that.
When they started off and then they're like, the subtitles were like Irish music playing, and it's just the most cliche doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and then like...
Yeah, the score has so many Irish lilts and things like that. I'm like, oh my god. It's like watching... You never think that Kenneth Branagh was Northern Irish because it feels like it reminded me of the movie Leap Year at times, which funnily enough was also directed by someone from Ireland, but you'd never tell.
Yeah, and funnily enough, the composer isn't Irish but Scottish because it's Patrick Doyle. who, among other things, worked on Brave.
It's like, can you make this score more Irish? It feels like in the first act of the movie they keep mentioning Ireland about 40 times, and then the MacGuffin of the film, the Aculos, they mention that even more. Except they obviously didn't mention it enough because I cannot get that name to stick in my head no matter how much I try.
As you know, the Aculos is the most important thing. As you know.
As you know.
I gotta admit, the movie kind of lost me after a point. So all this stuff about the Aculos, I'm like, whatever. Not following terribly well, because as much exposition as it was, it dares you to actually pay attention to what any of this, because they're throwing so much at you, but not actually showing any of it. So it's very boring.
Yeah. It's weird. It's like the people that wrote it took the tack of, okay, we're going to incorporate as much of this world as possible, but they just do it in just merciless dumps of information throughout the entirety of the movie, and half of it isn't even relevant to the story that's supposed to be being told. Like, most of this should be just informing the background stuff, but instead they stop the movie to have characters interact with goblins and things like that. Like, why is there a lengthy scene where Josh Gad is in a prison cell with goblins, and then he fries the goblin brain? What sense does that even make?
Right. They made a point to make it clear that goblin skin is fireproof, but their brains are not. And, like, we didn't need to know that.
No. In no way does that come back up again.
The execution of some of these scenes, it's like you understand the reasoning for some of it, but the way that they do it is very bad. Like, they have that scene where he's talking to the psychiatrist, and he states something about his chair, and it's a pointless detail. And so you figure, like, okay, immediately after he starts telling him all these details, he's like, this is my favorite chair, and it was the Queen's favorite chair, and my grandfather bought it. You know, immediately you're like, okay, so Artemis is going to say it's a fake. He's going to say all these details because he's very smart, and he knows a fake when he sees it. But the way that they go about it, they set it up, and then it's after he goes like, you're so smart and you know all these things and do, and then they're just like stating all of these things to you, when you could just have, like, he's talking to him about whatever behavioral problems or whatever he needs to talk to him for, and then throw in that detail about the chair, and then he says, like, oh, it's a fake, and then you understand just from that, like, this kid is very smart and he knows about history and he knows enough to know that this is not from the time period he said it was, rather than, like, after all of this dump to then do that. You could have cut some of that out.
Quick super chat from Ellen. Thank you again. Thank you. Everything about the movie is relentlessly functional. I think that's the best way of describing it. It's one of those movies where you can clearly tell they've chopped it up so that the only thing actually remaining of anything is literally just the story, such as it is. And so anything that doesn't serve it has been chopped out. Scenes end on really abrupt notes. Like, they don't feel like they have any kind of closure. It feels like scenes only exist to establish plot points.
Yeah, even the names are just functional. The butler is literally named Butler. The dwarf that digs is called Diggums. By the way, this movie is so whitewashed that, like, Diggums is supposed to be like a dwarf, and then, like, I say whitewashed, but I mean, like, they didn't cast a little person, so they were just like, let's just call attention to it a ton, just that he's very tall even though he's supposed to be short. It's like, why did it have to be a tall guy then? He's a dwarf. What's the point of this? You think that the star power of Josh Gad is what's going to get you through? Because, like, I've seen Josh Gad in maybe one role that I really liked, but otherwise, like, I think he's very annoying. Even then, I think he was just miscast in this role. I think there would have been a better person to play this dwarf character.
Oh yeah, Josh Gad is incredibly distracting throughout the entirety of the movie, not just because of the terrible narration and wraparound storyline, but also because he constantly keeps doing really annoying, out-of-place jokes throughout the entirety of his appearance. He has a scene where he's talking to Judi Dench and tells her that she looks like David Bowie, and calls her Brittany.
He does that like pop culture semi-improvised humor that is so distracting that they keep insisting on inserting into everything now.
Mhm.
It's like I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of it was improvised when he's doing those references like that.
Yeah. It really genuinely wouldn't surprise me. He's doing this while he's doing this dwarf voice, which is
It just sounds like someone
not a
doing a
good
bad
choice.
Batman impression.
Yeah.
It sounds really strained.
And then they do
And
the
that's even
like
before
the
we get
like
to the
body
biggest
horror
part.
elements with him.
Oh gosh, we were not prepared when that happened.
No.
Are we supposed to watch our language? I just threw a swear in here.
Whatever. It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
You watch your 4-leaf clover mouth there, lady.
Yes,
Yeah.
Josh Gad, in horrific CG effects, opens up his mouth in incredibly wide, like his entire jaw has been replaced in this monstrous form, and then he starts chewing through the ground, and it spurts out of his bum hole, like,
Yep. I like
that.
One line someone mentioned: "Men in Black meets Spy Kids meets Bright." I'm like, that's actually.
And they do that horrifying effect several times.
Oh.
It never looks convincing, and it always looks terrible.
Terrible.
And really freaky looking. Like, apparently that was something from the books. They kept that bit. They kept that bit. But, oh man.
Would have felt less weird if he looked fantastical in any way.
Mhm.
But it just looks like Josh Gad with a beard. It looks like Discount Hagrid.
Yeah, he steps on screen looking like Hagrid. There's no attempt to make him feel in any way fantastical, and then he just burrows through the ground like he's a mole. Cartoon Kelly again, and Disney wanted to cast a snowman. They sure did. I wish he was playing Olaf in this.
Mm-hmm.
Mulch Diggums. Mulch Diggums. Just the name. Mulch Diggums. This is something that's I realize is in the book, but it's stupid anyway. Mulch Diggums.
Well, I think it's just. Jeez.
Well, there is a character called Butler who they insist that you should never call Butler, even though that is both his name and occupation.
Yeah,
Yes.
the fact that here was something weird about his character. So they changed him into from a Eurasian character to a black character, which would not be as big of a deal if it wasn't a Butler character, and then they're like whitewashing other characters. That's very problematic to me. But then they add this weird aesthetic to him that is not part of this character, where he's got like this bleach blonde hair and bright blue contacts, and we were trying to figure out if this was just like an aesthetic, like this character just liked wearing contacts, or if he was supposed to be mystical in some way, or if, like you were theorizing, Matt, that he had like those like eye cameras in maybe to help him see things, but it didn't seem like the same.
Yeah.
It was just very weird.
It's an exceptionally weird detail that goes nowhere. The guy that plays him, Nonzo Anonzi, he's actually quite a regular in Kenneth Branagh's films. He's popped up several times. He popped up in Cinderella, and he has a big fight scene with Chris Pine in Jack Ryan. It just seemed like the excuse was there just to cast one of his regular actors.
You could have there were so many roles they could have put him in that was not the butler, though.
Yeah. See, it is hard to comprehend what actually goes on in this movie, because simultaneously so much happens and nothing happens. It's a $125 million movie where at least 2/3 of the running time is set in a house.
Yeah, and he captures the fairy, which is like the main plot of the first book, and it's just so little of it. And then like they have this whole thing with the butler's niece is there, and she's such a non-character. I feel like they cut out a lot of stuff with her.
Yeah.
All of this stuff with Holly, like, she had this whole arc about like being the first woman in her I don't know if it was department or section or whatever. Yeah. Like this was a big deal, like in the books, but in this, Judi Dench is there, so that's like not that there anymore. Mm-hmm. She had this thing about proving herself because her father, they said he was a traitor. I forget what the deal was with that, but regardless, like she's got this whole thing to prove, and she just has like nothing to do here, barely anything. Mm-hmm. It's weird, and it's strange that they do the whole Santa Claus thing where they have like children playing adult. So she's supposed to be like 84 years old, which is like young in fairy years, but obviously like old enough to, be a police officer or leprechaun or whatever.
For a second, yeah, because I got a low battery notification. I realized I hadn't put my laptop on charge.
Oh no!
But yeah, the point there about the fact that they made changes which entirely defeat the purpose of the character in the first place. Mm-hmm.
The Judi Dench thing too.
Oh yeah.
There's so much to cover. Yeah. Judi Dench. That the whatever villain kidnapped Colin Farrell sounds like Judi Dench. I don't know if that is her voice, but it sounded like her poorly disguised. I don't know what that was about. Mm-hmm. Maybe that was just
Judi Dench
what it sounded like
with her fairy ears.
It might have been the case that in their reshoots and other efforts, they might have done some recasting and had Judi Dench just read those lines and not
why would
thread
they
her.
Have her in particular do it though?
I don't know.
Yeah, this is what we go. This is what we go back to the character of supposedly Hong Chau plays Opal, an ostensible villain of the movie who doesn't actually do anything nor shows their face, and the voice is distorted throughout the entirety of the running time. So it seems like Hong might have got replaced at some point in the reshoots when they replaced that character, because that's the one that kidnaps Colin Farrell in the movie. But
I didn't understand the point of any of that. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know why I guess they had him kidnapped because the Fowls were making a bunch of trouble for, magical folk or something. But then I guess, I mean, I know she wanted the Oculus, but I just didn't really get the point of any of it.
No, it's because the movie is fabulously incoherent, despite the fact that
not Oculus. What was it called? It's not Oculus. What was the name of the thing?
It was called the Aculos.
Oculus is like that thing fake ghost hunters use to talk to ghosts, I think.
No, it's a VR headset, but same deal.
Oh, yeah, it's VR. Okay, I knew it was some sort of tech thing that's not what we were talking about.
Yeah. Oh, live another super chat from Tony Kogan. Did Artemis ever actually get told the villain's name? He just seems to know. Guess why that she's credited as shadowy female figure for 3 actors, and Hong Chau was meant to play her and was cut out. Oh, so I guess Wiki is inaccurate there, but yeah. So no, I don't think Artemis did actually learn Opal's name in this. He just suddenly knows it. But, that applies because so many things Artemis just suddenly knows out of absolutely nowhere, because I guess he read the journals or something. How does he know any of this? And then they confuse it even further with voiceover narration, where when Josh Gad's character finally enters into the plot, he says something along the lines of, well, Artemis's great scheme has gone into motion. He doesn't know that character. That wasn't part of his plan, was it? It just muddles what is already there in the first place.
And one of the other things that was brought up, I missed the very beginning of the movie when Artemis was surfing, but apparently there was at least a scene shot in Vietnam that where we don't know when that happened.
Is that the surfing, or where was the Vietnam stuff?
Or was just there's so many locations for this movie. There's several locations in Italy.
Because I thought the surfing was in Ireland, because there was voiceover over it where they were that was the most Ireland, Ireland, Ireland. Oh, we love Ireland. He loves to surf in the sea and the Ireland, and then play the bagpipes and the Ireland, Ireland, Ireland. All right, man, we get it.
Cool story, bro.
just relentlessly going on about Ireland. Like, oh, we've got a character that's doing a cool introduction. See, the thing about Artemis Fowl and the whole long development of it is that obviously what it reminds you of is the YA movies that came out 15 years ago. I made a joke something about it feeling like the hit movie of 2006. It feels like it's come out of a time machine.
Yeah, it feels like those movies right around like, City of Ember and, all those like young adult novels that were like, they tried to push like that big boom early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, because they wanted it to be the next Harry Potter. And there would be like
a freak.
There would
Percy
always be
Jackson.
there would always be just like the first in a series that you knew wasn't going to get a sequel, and this feels exactly like that. There's not going to be an Artemis Fowl 2. It ain't happening.
No, this movie ends on entirely unearned sequel bait that is never going to be resolved. Because this movie is not making its money back.
It might as well have ended with Princess Peach coming in going like, we gotta go on another adventure. I got my guns.
Like you say that, I would watch like 10 years from now, they'd somehow decide to make a sequel to that for no good reason. It has nothing to do with the original Super Mario Brothers movie. Just, but geez, the amount of sequel bait they did at the end of this was hilarious. Just
it's doubly embarrassing because how bad the movie is before.
Because at that point they had to have known that they were just trying to get a product out and cut their losses. And at that point,
someone corrected me. It was Princess Daisy, not Peach. I apologize for misremembering the Super Mario Brothers movie. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
I just want to make that correction.
The other thing that I felt was more befuddling was just sort of like the way that the dialogue was written. I always like to look up who does the screenplay, and the pedigree for the screenwriting for this was not particularly strong. From I could tell, you had someone whose background was in like comedy writing, and someone whose background comedy writing as in like Mr. Bean movies and the like. And another one whose background was primarily in being a playwright. So I'm just like, So it felt like there's many questionable decisions throughout the entire production that compounded itself during the reshoots and reworks and exchanging of licenses and all that stuff.
Yeah. Two more super chats. One from Dana Himrich. Alison, you're the only person who seems to remember that god-awful City of Ember movie.
I remember it because I worked at the movie theater when it came out, and I got to see it for free. But they also gave us mini posters, which is a sign that a movie's going to do badly, because they give like free mini posters out. And we were so bored working box office one day, I colored it with Sharpie. They were like falling off of a cliff or something, and I changed it to City of Dismember, and then it was super funny.
And Stephanie Z, the Vietnam shoot is the first of the deleted scenes. Also, how would they even make a sequel to this? Well, first of all, they would find someone to actually cast in the role of Opal, because clearly that was a decision they didn't want to make. It's like, let's have a sensible villain of the movie entirely off screen, do nothing, and then the film is resolved through the characters not really doing much of anything. It just happens to them through Deus Ex Machina.
I'm the main villain of the movie. I will do nothing but talk and then go, no, at the end.
Whoa.
Yeah. I should mention the visual look of the movie. I was sort of impressed with the sort of fancy world that they envisioned to a certain extent, because on a production level it looks quite impressive.
The fairy world looks expensive and well made. Like the effects
but then
there.
They get to the action stuff. Yeah, they get to the action stuff, and that's where it really starts falling down.
Oh yeah, when him and the butler are like fighting, and then the butler guy takes out the crossbow or whatever, bow and arrow. It looks so bad.
Yeah, there is so many terrible bits of CGI physics in this, really groan worthy, and it feels like Branagh is constantly throwing CGI in your face. Constantly, even in shots that don't really require it. Just like there'll be some detail in the background and it just feels gratuitously expensive. It feels like it's got a really ugly, overproduced look to it, the entirety of the film. And half of the effect shots are because of this big time bubble they throw around Artemis's house that spends half the movie collapsing. They shatter at the halfway point, but it takes another half an hour for it to finally fall down. And whilst it's doing so, it's sucking the fairy officers through it, and we get this warp effect of
yeah, that looked really bad.
It looked like
that looked horrendous.
It looked like a cheap 90s music video effect.
Yeah, I was just gonna say very 90s feel to that.
Yeah,
and there was one or two shots that had like effect shots that had a very low frame rate, and I wasn't sure if that was the intention or not, or if that was like they were slowing it down and it wasn't supposed to be, like it wasn't filmed for that or whatever. But it looked very bad.
There was
there's way too much effects in this at every stage.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember you mentioning there was one thing where a door looked like it moved at a low frame rate, and then watching it again, it's like, oh no, it's just an overly detailed door with segmented lights creating it, and it's way too much detail to spend on a background piece that makes it just look like it's running at a lower frame rate than the rest of the film. So it's just
it didn't look good. And there was one that was supposed to be like a big money shot for the movie, like it was when they're using the big plot device whatever thing that they found, and then like Holly activates it, I think, and they have this like panning zoom shot of her looking at it, and it's lighting up and it's doing whatever it's supposed to do, and it was like a low frame rate for some reason, like so it looked like they didn't film it for slow motion, but then they slowed it down, and that's like a very important shot in the movie.
Another super chat from Cartoon Kelly. You're spoiling me, Kelly. Steady on. Alison, would a Model Land movie make more sense than this?
No. No, it would not. Look, Model Land as a book doesn't make sense. As a movie, it would be even more nonsense.
It would resemble this to a certain extent.
I would hope Model Land as a movie would be more entertaining than Artemis Fowl. This is sad.
Yeah,
it's really sad.
It's not so bad it's good. It's just really, really bad in so many different ways. This is literally Disney giving a whole wall of money and setting it on fire like the Joker. It's frankly obscene at times.
It lost me partway through, and I was getting very bored, and it just felt like a lot of the same. It felt like one long act.
Yeah, well, half the movie feels like an action sequence. Yeah, like they storm onto Fowl's manor, and that's pretty much the rest of the movie.
Oh yeah, can we talk about when the big I think it was a troll, the big troll guy falls on top of the butler, and they have the sad scene.
Yeah.
What'd you guys think of that?
I like how...
the best thing I think with someone who got crushed by a chandelier is to move them up several flights of stairs into a completely different room.
Yeah, they sit him up in the chair as he's dying of internal injuries.
Yeah. I like how with Butler, they had him doing kendo with Artemis earlier on, and then it's like, in kendo, there's a term to use about like finishing off someone, Kirioroshi, to finish the killing blow. It's just like, are you saying that Artemis should grab his sword and just end it right now, Butler? What are you saying?
That'd be badass.
That would have been just like, what is that?
He saves him during a stupid fight. A big CGI thing falls on top of him. It looks so silly, and then they cut to them being all sad because he's dying. They've propped him up in a chair. His outfit isn't even messed up. It's so clean. It's like, we're supposed to feel sad about this.
And on top of this, there was the comment earlier about everything feeling like it's all like utilitarian, and that was definitely the case because you had this Italian wedding scene where a troll shows up, and is there one to set up the troll for later on, and two to establish, don't use fairy magic to heal humans, you can't do that, and then the reversal at the end when they remove the magic barrier to allow Holly to heal Butler, and it's just like everything feels like, oh, it's either there to explain the plot, to be a specific setup, or whatever, and
yeah.
And that's why I think it feels so padded and strained and rushed all at the same time. It's because everything is so utilitarian that it's like it's Chekhov's shotgun over and over again.
Yeah, there is no characters here. There is no story. There is only plot. I feel like there is a difference between plot and story. Plot is what drives the characters. Story is what the movie is supposed to be about. The movie is really about nothing.
Yeah.
There are no themes. There is no nothing. There is just lots and lots of expense thrown on screen to the point where it becomes so disconnected from anything you could tangibly connect to. You don't know why things are happening and for what reason, and the whole thing is carried along with this really disinterested vibe. You can tell that Kenneth Branagh had no real connection with the source material whatsoever, neither did the writers. You can tell that the writers looked at these books and went, well, we can't adapt these, throw in a bunch of stuff, make the plot as broadly generic as possible, and that's about it. It feels like it's aimed at no one in particular, because if you're a fan of Artemis Fowl, you will be appalled at what they've done to this movie. And if you're completely unfamiliar with Artemis Fowl, like I am, you'll just spend the whole movie going, I don't even know what is going on half the time. It's a real muddle of a movie that succeeds on absolutely no level. I can't, apart from production design, I can't think of many virtues for this film.
Yeah, there's a lot of Artemis Fowl, the character, telling us he is a genius, but not actually doing anything genius. Right. And they had an out for the problem I had with the book that I read, just the first one, in that he, as an anti-hero, he's not there's nothing really to cling to with him that you like about him. And they mix some stuff in from the other books so that his dad's kidnapped. So the reason that he's doing this is to save his dad. So he's really willing to do some unscrupulous things in order to save his father. And you could tell that this relationship with his father, when he's talking to him and he just goes all right, just tell me when you're going to leave. They're setting up some things with these characters, but it's really unfortunate that this is just off of 3 days of reshoot. So it's not a through line through the movie.
Yeah. No, you can't just bolt that stuff onto the narrative later and expect it to suddenly work.
Right.
Another super chat from Kelly. Sorry about all the super chats. Just trying to give a little something back to one of the YouTubers keeping me sane this year. Promise this will be the last one, so I think of another one. Oh, thank you, Kelly. You're so generous. I was just a little bit worried. That was all. But yeah, the fact is, this Artemis Fowl adaptation is essentially, because it's treated as a problem to be solved, it takes away the entire identity of what it's adapting, and it just ends up feeling like a bunch of things that you've seen from other movies.
Yeah, and I think that's what happens when you have a movie, like you said, that doesn't have a story. So there's nothing that the movie is about. So all you're left with is basically the trappings that the film is trying to do to advance the plot. And that's why I think we spent so much time, I think others have, just thinking of all these other movies that this just reminds us of. And because at that point you're just thinking about, well, here's the same trappings I've seen before in X, Y, or Z film. And
yeah, I mean, we were throwing them around like Stormbreaker is in there, the sort of James Bond thing, the Men in Black, Bright,
the
Jupiter Ascending.
I got a whole Guardians of the Galaxy sort of vibe with Mulch's whole angle too, just it's just so weird how it comes off.
Has my microphone been off the microphone been off the? Oh no! I've activated the wrong microphone.
Oh jeez. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like they just sort of cobbled it together from parts, and as such, it has no real identity of its own anymore.
Yeah.
Power Beam 08. The animated shows and movies I highly recommend Now and Then Here, Outlaw Star, Attack on Titan, Tekken Key Treat, Cowboy Bebop, Millennium Actress, Berserk, Azobi Azobase, Kill la Kill, and ReZero. I have heard of some of those.
Yeah.
I have heard of some of
Yep.
them. Stephanie Z again. This should have been Disney's A24 style thriller. It's interesting, actually, on that point, because people have mentioned, oh, it could have been like Die Hard with a fancy twist or something like that, or a heist thriller. And you get none of that from the final products of the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, the heist. Right, I was thinking like the Ocean's 11 Italian Job sort of vibe with the heist angle towards the end that it lasts for about 5 minutes, because that's how long it takes for Mulch to eat his way into the mansion and then open the safe, and then it's like,
yeah,
there's the MacGuffin just right there.
It's like, is that a heist? I mean, if the movie is supposed to be about a criminal, like a criminal mastermind child, make him a criminal mastermind. Yeah. They're constantly afraid of actually making him the villain.
Yeah, I feel like the book was much more successful in that way, that it did feel like a heist with a super genius child and them trying to constantly outwit each other, but he knows about the magical worlds, and they they underestimate this human child that they're coming up against. But it doesn't feel like any of that. It doesn't feel like much of anything. I didn't really get a lot from Artemis Fowl as a character. Yep. If I hadn't read the book, I would understand even less about what they were trying to go for in this movie. I don't know why the focus on Josh Gad. Like, he's not a very good character, and he's not in that much of it. All of a sudden, he's the protagonist. Why?
Yeah. I mean, Artemis, I didn't even get the impression that he was all that smart in the movie, because he doesn't seem to be acting like it as much as they keep telling us that he is. The only reason he seems like he's smart is because he suddenly knows the exposition when he's required to.
Right. The one scene that like tries really hard to show him off how smart he is about fairies is like when Judi Dench shows up and like he invites her into his house and all this stuff, and it's the movie trying to be very clear, like, yeah, he knows all this stuff about the fairy world, and otherwise I'm like, it just seems so stilted.
Yeah, it's supposed to be this scene of, oh, he's the mastermind, he's playing all the chess pieces. No, he isn't. He doesn't. He's clearly not in command of that scene. Judi Dench is.
Yeah,
it's just a kid who kidnapped a fairy by pure dumb luck and knew like a few things, and then it seems like he's completely in over his head once the fairies actually arrive and they're under assault.
That's such a god, right? Because once the troll shows up, like he's completely out of his element, and it further makes the criminal mastermind line that happens after all that to be even more groan-worthy and forced.
Yeah, someone in the chat said the movie reminded them of A Wrinkle in Time. That's what Disney Plus suggested right after this finished. They're like, let's watch A Wrinkle in Time.
If you enjoyed this Disney live-action fantasy box office bomb, you would also like another Disney box office fantasy bomb at the box office. Oh man, I mean, it has that thing that so many would-be franchise starters also have, in that it never actually feels like it always feels like it's deferring for a sequel. You know, it's like, oh, well, we don't have time to do this, so we'll put it in the sequel. Right. We're gonna cram in all the world building stuff in this one. Next time we'll do a movie. No, do the movie first. Like, you don't get a franchise if you don't have a good movie.
Yeah, like they think the name alone will get them through it, like it's guaranteed. And then, like, if they just make the first one exposition, then you can get to the actual like movie stuff in the next one. It's like, well, that's not going to happen, is it?
Like I made a reference to Detective Pikachu just as an example of what I was thinking of, an adaptation that requires a lot of world building, and I'm somewhat familiar with that, so the world building was easier for me to pick up on, so I don't know what it would be like for someone who's completely blind going in. But I felt that was a case where there was more elegant world building and less like effort at blatant sequel baiting or otherwise, because I don't think there was really any in that. Whereas this was just exposition, info dump, move the plot along, bait the sequel, done.
Yeah, I mean, Detective Pikachu, I went into it not knowing anything about the game or the plot, and I still followed it. And you're right, it didn't act like it was, supposed to be part of a franchise and have a sequel. And that's why this one fails, in that it felt like they were just like, we're going to make a franchise out of this rather than we are going to make a good movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a bad faith movie in that respect. It's not aimed to make a good movie. It's aimed to create a franchise, and it's so painfully obvious in all respects in that area.
And the difference is you can clearly tell that Detective Pikachu is made by people who went, okay, we're making this accessible. We're making this so that if people don't know what Pokemon is, they can still get a grasp of what's going on. Whereas this is made by people whose idea of making it accessible is just constantly unloading information on the audience, superfluous or not.
Well, and considering, I mean, Detective Pikachu bringing that, it's not like, I don't know if it's like a great comparison,
Sure.
but that is a bizarre plot for a movie. It is weird, even for Pokemon. It is a very, very weird idea. Like, it would be the last thing you would think they would make an adaptation of. And yet they made a really great, tight little standalone movie with it. You don't have to be familiar with Pokemon. You don't have to be familiar with that game. But they made a great standalone movie there that felt like it was part of a world you could expand on if you wanted to. And that's what they should have done with Artemis Fowl. Just create a really good standalone movie with a great world. And if people really like that, you can go on and make your franchise. People will watch it. You don't have to say, like, here's the franchise that we're making. Just make a solid single movie.
The sequel is the expansion pack, not the first one. The first one shouldn't be just pure vomit. I mean, I would really like to have some sort of competition for someone to find one line of dialogue in Artemis Fowl that isn't in some way exposition.
Yeah.
Like, every single scene, even up until the end.
Absolutely.
It gets to the end of the movie, they're still...
And he's going like, Artemis set up this thing, and do, and that's why I did this, and do. It feels like we're at the end of, like, the murder mystery, and they're like, and that is why so-and-so was the murderer, because they do. All right, man.
Listen, okay.
Key events happen off screen. They're just mentioned in an offhanded line of dialogue. You can really tell that they were just subbing in for missing material.
Yeah.
I would love to know what the original cut was, because I feel like it was probably better, to be honest. I don't know if it was good, but I think it was probably better than this, because it's messy.
Yeah.
It's so messy. You would look at this and you think, man, Kenneth Branagh has never directed anything in his life. When Kenneth Branagh has literally been making movies for 30 years.
He's been making movies about as long as this movie's been in development.
It's like, I know Branagh gets lumped in as being the Shakespeare guy, but he has been sort of he's had this weird career of being the Hollywood sort of for hire guy on projects like Jack Ryan. He previously worked with Disney on Cinderella. Like, he's not above this sort of thing. But it doesn't feel like a Kenneth Branagh movie in any way. Whenever I watch a Kenneth Branagh film, I feel like I instantly know one of his movies, because they feel insanely theatrical at all times, often bombastically so. I felt that was a problem with this version of Murder on the Orient Express, in that they try to take a chamber piece, essentially, and then just try to goose it up with thunderstorms and avalanches and runaway escapes. And it's like, you're just adding nothing to this whatsoever. But at least that felt like a Kenneth Branagh movie. You know, it doesn't have any of the sort of over-the-top silliness of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is literally just full-on operatic turned up to 11, or anything like that. It's personality-free.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like anyone in particular owned this.
No. It feels like the Disney executives definitely bundled in on Kenneth Branagh very quickly after that, what was presumably a terrible test screening.
I wonder if after that, just piecing together this reshoot mess, that's why it feels so soulless, because they were like, we're just trying to, like, get a finished movie out at this point.
Yeah. It has all the trademarks of a movie that has been fixed. And by fixed, I mean they got something out of this. It's not going to make any money whatsoever. It was never going to make any money. If they released this in theatres, it was going to stink up the place. Because this is garbage. Absolutely rubbish.
Maybe
So
maybe
bad.
going straight to streaming saved it, because now you can watch it with your friends, make fun of it, and rewind when she says lines, when Judi Dench says lines about, shamrocks or four-leaf clovers or whatever, top of the morning.
Yeah.
You're like, what? And you can do that in theater. You could take bathroom breaks in the middle of it and not miss anything. It's great.
I don't know if that counts.
Yeah, the great thing is it's open for mockery.
I don't know.
It's already a rental. It's an automatic rental. Don't have to spend theater money.
Thank God you don't have to spend theatre money on this tripe. Can you imagine being sat there in watching something like this? I feel like I've watched this kind of movie before, and I know exactly how that feels watching something like this so leaden.
You'd have kids behind you, like, what's happening? I don't know what's going on in the movie.
I would say that's the only line of the movie I could think of that was a strict exposition, is to get the four-leaf clover out of here. Just
four-leaf clover.
So
would either of you? Okay, if this was never mind that wording. Would either of you recommend this as a make fun of it watch, or just to just don't bother?
I feel like if you had the right band of
Yes.
friends, especially if you were a fan of the books, yes. If you're not necessarily a fan of the books and you're watching solo, no.
Absolutely. I think watching with at least one person who's familiar with the source material even lightly helps a lot, because then it's easier to notice the mishandlings in the production. And I think with the right group of people, it can be entertaining. I'll say this. I enjoyed the watch, as bad as the movie was, because it was with you two, obviously. I would not have gotten as much enjoyment, or if any, watching it on my own, because I would have been just sitting there confused and with nobody to be like, what the heck just happened there?
Yeah.
I
Well, it
mean,
helps too, to not feel like you're going crazy. What happened? No one else knows. All right.
Yeah.
I think this is right on down there with probably one of the worst YA movies I think I've ever seen. I mean, there's a whole litany of really bad adaptations like Aragon and Cirque du Freak and things like that. But even those have their moments. This is completely DOA, in my opinion.
At least City of Ember had a giant mole killing Bill Murray, and that was pretty great. And it had an interesting world to look at. And I feel like when we didn't the very few scenes in the fairy world in this looked fantastical and great, but the rest of it was it's just set in a rich person house. It's not very interesting. The fact they filmed in so many countries and yet got this, spent so much money and yet got this is really, really sad. And I guess it proves that just throwing money at something does not make something good.
Absolutely.
No. I think that pretty much wraps it up. I think that's as much as we really have to say on this disaster piece.
Yeah.
So Alison, where can people find you?
You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/movie nights the series, or on Twitter under @AlisonPregler.
And Skitch, where can people find your work? Including my title sequence for Bad Movie Beatdown.
Oh, geez. I haven't put that up on my Bandcamp yet. I probably should at some point. But you can find me on Twitter at Skitch Music, and you can find music I've made over at skitch.bandcamp.com. But yeah.
Including the Movie Nights theme.
That is on there, yes.
And you can, of course, find me on Twitter, FB_BMB. If you would like to do me the favour of smashing that like button and tickling the bell, or whatever you're supposed to do these days. You can also find myself on Patreon at patreon.com.
Oh, jeez. In the words of Cartoon Kelly, I think you four-leaf clovered that up there.
Yeah, another super chat there from Kelly.
Tickle the bell.
Tickle the bell.
I was going to go more rude there, but I decided just settle for tickle.
Ding the dong.
Ding the dong there.
Scratch his back. Alright, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the stream, and I will wrap it up. Until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.
Bye.